Cut content is one of the most fascinating things to look at in any game series, especially The Legend of Zelda. From Ocarina of Time's Unicorn Fountain and Triforce to Twilight Princess's Moblin, what's not in a Zelda game is often just as interesting as what is. One of the most infamous Zelda games when it comes to cut content is The Wind Waker, a game which was rushed due to time constraints. Aonuma mentions having to fight against the clock towards the end of development, apologising in particular for the tedious nature of the Triforce Fetch quest. The Wind Waker's files are full of early content, test rooms, unused items, animations, text and more, likely things which would have been cut if the game had more development time. But perhaps most interestingly, the game cut out 2 entire dungeons which were intended for release. On many occasions, both Aonuma and Miyamoto have mentioned these 2 dungeons as elements they'd have liked to include in the final game, but due to time constraints were unable to. However, when asked if we could see these missing dungeons return in the Wind Waker HD on the Wii U, Aonuma claimed that they essentially no longer exist, as elements and features from them have been reused and implemented in other dungeons later on in the series, though he can't tell us which ones. So whatever the Wind Waker's missing dungeons were, they've most likely been chopped up and Frankensteined into other dungeons in the series, their puzzles, bosses, themes and stories repackaged for later Zelda games. But what were they? How might the Wind Waker look if the game was padded out by 2 additional dungeons? Let's look into it. The Wind Waker is my absolute favourite game in the Zelda series. A charming, whimsical adventure, on the surface appearing beautifully cartoonish both aesthetically and thematically, though built on the stronger foundation of decidedly more adult themes. The story begins on Outset Island, where Link, a young boy entirely unrelated to any previous hero, lives with his grandma and sister Aryll in peace, in their humble home in the quiet fishing village. However, this peace is shattered by the Helmarok King, who snatches Aryll from the island, taking her to the Forsaken Fortress, where Ganondorf has begun working in secret. Aryll's capture forces Link, who was conveniently clad in the legendary green tunic as is tradition when young boys come of age, to set sail with the pirates, embarking on his quest to save her and ultimately decide the fate of Hyrule. The Wind Waker features 5 main dungeons: Dragon Roost Cavern, Forbidden Woods, the Tower of the Gods and the Earth and Wind Temples, with Forsaken Fortress and Ganon's Tower being slightly smaller, less traditional dungeons. But where might the additional cut dungeons have fit in? The most obvious choice for one of the cut dungeons would involve Great Fish Isle and Jaboon, during the game's opening act. The game begins with a similar formula to Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past before it, where Link must gather 3 elemental artifacts in order to gain access to the Master Sword. Firstly, the Pendants of Power, Courage and Wisdom, then the Kokiri Emerald, Goron Ruby and Zora's Sapphire, and finally Din, Furore and Nehru's Pearls. The pendants are given to Link after the Eastern Palace, Desert Palace and Tower of Hera, and the Hero of Time is rewarded the Spiritual Stones after the Great Deku Tree, Dodongo's Cavern and inside Jabu Jabu's belly. Similarly, the Hero of Winds is rewarded Din's Pearl from Kamali after the completion of Dodongo's Cavern, and Furore's Pearl is given by the Great Deku Tree after the completion of the Forbidden Woods. However, the 3rd Goddess Pearl, Nehru's, is given freely to Link by the Water Spirit Jaboon, with no accompanying dungeon or challenge. Granted, after this, Link must complete the Tower of the Gods before he can reach the Master Sword, bringing the total number of dungeons in the first section of the game to 3. But it seems strange that the elements of fire and forest are represented with early game dungeons, but water isn't. The first 2 pearls are received on islands which match their element, the volcanic Dragon Roost Island and the woodland Forest Haven. The 3rd elemental island would have been Great Fish Isle, the home of Jaboon and an unseen colony. but it was cleaved apart by Ganondorf before Link reached it. The water spirit was somehow able to flee the island prior to this, hiding in a cave behind Outset Island protected by a thick stone wall, meaning Link has to grab the bombs from Windfall Island before blowing open the cave. It takes a minute for the King of Red Lions to convince Jaboon that he senses great courage in Link, after which the fish will grant him the Goddess Pearl. The abrupt, seemingly rushed nature of this Pearl's quest makes many people think that this could have been a part of the game from which a dungeon was cut. Instead of simply giving Link the Goddess Pearl, might he have originally asked for the hero's aid, just like the other guardian spirits? Perhaps a dungeon was found beneath the ruined Great Fish Isle, where the island's inhabitants had fled Ganondorf's rampage and must be rescued. A map found in Tetra's cabin hints at the importance of Great Fish. It's a part of a triangle alongside Dragon Roost and Forest Haven, which when combined with the Triangle Island's separate triangle form the shape of the Triforce, with the Tower of the Gods and Hyrule Castle at the centre. Or maybe Jaboon could be suffering a similar fate to his predecessor, Lord Jabu Jabu, and be riddled with a parasitic infection, which Link must cure from inside. Jaboon has a few interesting unused assets which hint at a larger role in the original game, such as an unused swimming animation, meaning it's likely that he originally was not only going to appear within his cave. In addition to this, Jaboon has 2 unused voice clips, one of him roaring and laughing, and another of him seemingly screaming in pain. What these unused assets would have been used for is unknown, but it's possible they'd have been used in conjunction with a Great Fish Isle or Jaboon themed dungeon, which rewarded Link with Nehru's Pearl. Another element of the game that was rushed, in the opinions of A.G. Aonuma, was the Triforce Fetch quest. It's explained that when the Hero of Time was sent back to the past, therefore creating an alternate timeline, the Triforce of Courage he held was shattered into 8 pieces, scattered across the land. Link must track down these pieces, either found by scavenging chests at the bottom of the Great Sea, found using Triforce charts deciphered by Tingle, or locating shrines under islands. This part of the game, in my opinion, isn't as awful as people make out. It gives a chance to fully explore all the details of the game's beautiful world, though I'll admit that the HD version's streamlining of the quest made it a whole lot smoother. Either way, Aonuma has gone on record saying that he wishes he fixed this part of the game, and that many things towards the end of development got the green light despite seeming unfinished. So some fans believe that, in place of scavenging across the seas for the Triforce of Courage, it might have been the reward for a late game dungeon, much like the adventure of Link's Great Palace, where Link must prove his worth and defeat even his own shadow to claim the Triforce piece. However, there's no real evidence to support the idea that a dungeon once replaced the scavenger hunt, outside of the fact that Aonuma felt the fetch quest was rushed. Another popular theory on the identity of the 2 missing dungeons are the mini-dungeons in which you obtain the power bracelets and iron boots, Fire Mountain and Ice Ring Isle. These 2 mini-dungeons are accessed using the ice and fire arrows respectively, by freezing the erupting mountain or thawing the freezing island, which starts a 5-minute timer in which Link has to access the dungeon and grab the item. Even a 5-minute timer is a huge amount of time to beat these challenges. Even Ice Ring Isle, which has comparatively a little more content, can be run through in a couple of minutes, and Fire Mountain barely takes a single minute. Because of the apparent rushed nature of these mini-dungeons, it's often speculated that these were the 2 dungeons cut, and reduced to tiny timed challenges. It's obvious to see why. Both of them are represented on the map, as only main locations in the game are, and they house key items like dungeons usually do. Perhaps at one point these were full fire and ice temples, with mini-bosses guarding the power bracelets and iron boots, and full bosses at the end. The game's files feature an alternate version of Fire Mountain's interior, a larger cavern with platforms hanging from chains like in Dragon Roost Cavern. However, the area still feels decidedly mini-dungeon-like. It's just a single large room, just long and straight rather than circular in the final version, which is a better shape for a dungeon fit inside a small volcano. However, while the evidence for Ice Ring Isle ever being a full dungeon ends here, Fire Mountain still has some interesting connections. The mini-dungeon is a volcanic peak, which Link must freeze to enter through the top, dropping inside the mountain from above. A similarly designed island exists in Wind Waker concept art, Stovepipe Island. Stovepipe Island is depicted in a small sketch in Hyrule Historia, a tall mountain island, smoke pouring from crevices and the peak. A small town is built into a natural valley in the slope of the mountain, with simple houses constructed against the rocky face, cobbled streets and a little stream. One path from the village curves round to the right, across a dangerous magma valley to a secret cave at the rear, and another leads up through the village, out of the top, past a hot spring lake and presumably to the peak of the island, where Link can enter. The fact that we have concept artwork for an island similar to Fire Mountain both in design and entrance makes me wonder if this might have been the original concept for the volcanic peak, a full town found on the slopes of the active volcano, the interior of which houses a dungeon. While this would have of course been similar to Dragon Roost Island, where the Rito live, the notes on the artwork detail that this island would have focused on steam and smoke, an interesting counterpart to the element of fire which would help it stand out, perhaps involving puzzles with pipes and steam with a more technologically advanced feel. This steam focus is highlighted not only in the island's name, Stovepipe Island, a pipe which moves the steam from a stove into a chimney, but the artwork itself, which features small designs for pipe systems and valves, as well as a sketch of an example of the creatures who could have lived here, a squat fella with steam poofing from his head, who fascinatingly would have loved tobacco. We can even see him puffing on something. While this island seems it would have been an incredibly unique addition to the Wind Waker, it does have similarities to another dungeon in the series, Twilight Princess's Goron Mines. The Goron Mines are Twilight Princess's second dungeon, found within Death Mountain, where the Goron's leader Darbus has been imprisoned due to the Fused Shadow's corruption. Not only does the Goron Mines extensively feature pipes and valves, as well as hot springs near the dungeon's entrance, its respective race, the Gorons, bear a strong resemblance to the smoking creature from Stovepipe, in particular Koromoto, whose back is covered in smoking vents. If Stovepipe Island did in some small way influence Goron Mines, then could it have been one of the Wind Waker's cut dungeons, which was repurposed and reworked for the next game in the series, Twilight Princess? Fire Mountain could have been designed very quickly, reusing assets from Dragon Roost Cavern to stand in its place as a mini-dungeon as deadlines drew near. It's entirely possible, but we'll probably never know for sure. Overall, it's a shame we'll likely never know what the original plan for the Wind Waker looked like. While games often drastically change during development, with huge parts shifting direction or being left out, it's interesting that the Wind Waker's developers recognise in particular these two missing dungeons. I'd love to play the version of the Wind Waker with its missing dungeons, but in a way, we already have. The elements repurposed and redesigned to fit later games in the series. Perhaps next time you play Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, or even Skyward Sword, you're unknowingly walking through labyrinths which were designed years earlier to appear on the Great Sea. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, leave a like or subscribe if you haven't already for more Zelda content. And let me know in the comments down below what you think the Wind Waker's missing dungeons might have been. All sources used in the making of this video are found in the description below. Cheers guys, and I'll see you next time.